Welcome to the 10th episode of MoveMint. So I'm back here again today with my co-host, Dr. Radhakrishnan. We have a special guest, but before we go on to discussing the latest topics with our guest, just going to go through a brief introduction. So thank you to everyone that's tuned into the podcast so far. We've been having some extraordinary feedback. So thank you to those people who have sent some feedback into us. I want to thank our partners. So the Fit India movement, thank you very much for your support. The Back to Fitness Clinic, that's the clinic that Rajat runs. La Ultra the High, the race that Rajat puts together. And Moving Mountains Within, which is the film about the 10th edition of La Ultra the High. So thanks very much for joining us again. And I'll hand over to Rajat, who's going to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Darren. So today we have a special guest. We've known each other for the last 15 years. So when I moved back from London, so it's actually very apt that you're doing this one. So when I moved back from London and I was at Manipal Hospital setting up a sports medicine department, Dr. Radhakrishnan was kind enough to just make me very familiar with the whole place and the hospital. So welcome on board, and please introduce yourself, Dr. Radha.
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Radhakrishnan. People know me by various names, CN, Krish, Krishnan, whatever. I'm basically a pediatric surgeon and a pediatric urologist. I basically belong to Bangalore. I grew up here, studied here, then spent 10 years in the UK training in pediatric surgery and moved back to Bangalore in 2002, where I've lived and worked ever since.
Fantastic. So I just wonder whether you could just go into a bit more detail about sort of your academic and professional background, sort of what type of patients you work with.
Okay, so I basically work only with kids, and more and more as practice has gone on, most of my work has been pediatric urology, which is the kidneys, bladder of kids, if you like. And therefore, although the medical patient itself is the child, the people who you need to deal with are the parents. And that's the real challenge. I know how to manage most pediatric surgical conditions, but each parent is different. They come with their own ideas and their own hang-ups and their own anxieties. And therein lies the challenge. And a lot of pediatric training actually teaches you how to deal with parents, apart from dealing with the child and the child's medical problem.
Right. Thanks for that, Radha. And, what about your journey? Since we are, this whole podcast is about movement medicine. What about your own journey about maybe as a child in a school and then, after that in a medical college, practice, and then, having picked up running? So a little bit about that, how did you go about it?
Okay, so I think I've always done sport. I played tennis, hockey, and cricket in school. And played that quite actively and was quite passionate about it, especially cricket. I played cricket for school, and then I played cricket quite a lot. And I continued to play cricket till I actually started to do my post-graduation in surgery. And then, since I was a wicketkeeper, I had bruised fingers all the time. And so I had to stop playing cricket. And which is when I started to play golf and, tennis initially, and hockey. And then took up golf about 10 years ago. So besides running, I also do play tennis and I do play golf on a regular basis, apart from going to the gym, of course. So when I was in school, we had something called the National Cadet Corps. Rajat will be familiar with that. To those of you who are not familiar with what the NCC is, it's a kind of a quasi-military training, if you like, that the Indian Defence Forces give to school and college children. And it's a lot of marching, and they generally expose you to what the rigors and the discipline of Army life or the Air Force life is. And that involved initially a 4-kilometer run and then a 6-kilometer run as part of the routine. And because you had to do it, most of us hated it. And I did that for years. I think I did that for like 6 years. Every Saturday morning, I had to get out to one of the parks and with this army instructor, and I had to run. And I absolutely hated it. And then, of course, that stopped once I went into medical school. But I continued to play tennis and hockey there. And but I would go to the gym. I think I've been to the gym about 3-4 times a week ever since I can remember, and I still do that. 2004, I think 3-4 is when Rajat came back to Manipur, and once he joined, he actually we knew the legend behind Rajat and his running. I mean, we'd heard of it. And Rajat then started us off. He started small running groups in Bangalore. And Sunday mornings, he would find a quiet part of town and we would gather there and then we would run. And some of us would run 5 kilometers, others would run 20, 30, 40 kilometers. Rajat probably even more. And that's when it started to get enjoyable. I actually started to enjoy running at that point in time. And I think there are 2 classes of people who try running. There's one class who absolutely hates it and will not do it again. And there's the other class of people who absolutely love it and can't do without it. And I don't know, for good or bad, belong to that second class. And I started to run at that point in time. And the 5 kilometers got to 10K, and then the 10K got to the half marathons. And I did halves for many, many years. I probably did, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 halves. Till 2 years ago, I suddenly woke up one morning and said, I need to do a full. And then I started training for that. And 2 years ago, I did the Bangalore full. Haven't done a full since, but have done halves again. So that's the running journey. It's I think it's very much in your head. When I first told friends about how I was doing a 10-kilometer run, many of them actually laughed at me and would ridicule me and asked me whether I didn't have enough money for my car petrol anymore. Gradually, as time went on, many of them joined. And now we have a big running group that we run together with. And in fact, one of the girls who used to make the most fun of me, she's a pediatrician. She graduated to full, she graduated to ultras, she's done the Machu Picchu marathon, she's done the Antarctica marathon, she's done everything. And she was the one who probably made the most fun of me when she heard me telling her that I ran the 10 kilometers. So as I've gone along in my journey, I think I'm glad that I've taken a lot of other people along with me. And that's fantastic.
Brilliant, Radha. Thank you.
So how do you think being physically active has changed your professional journey? Has it given you a different perspective as you've kind of developed through your career?
I think you can't sustain running unless you develop some discipline. And the one thing I don't do anymore is late Saturday nights, for example. It just doesn't happen. The other thing, as you start to run more and more, is you realize that you need to get more fit to run. And that fitness then shows up in your work. A lot of my work involved standing, absolutely still with my head bent for about 3 hours with a headlight on and my magnifying glasses on. And that used to kill my back and kill my neck. But as I've gone along and, strengthened core and strengthened all these parts of my body as well, I think surgery has become a lot less laborious. That's number one. And number two, as you start to lose weight and start to look healthy, it rubs off on your patients and colleagues as well. And suddenly people are wondering, how come you're looking so fit? And you tell them why you're looking so fit. And then they start to do it as well. So it's not only helped me, it's and therefore my patients in the results of my work, but it's also, I think, inadvertently maybe, helped convert a lot of colleagues into fitness as well.
So Radha, how about the patients then? I mean, in the practice itself, so from a very personal journey and colleagues, that's one part of it. But does your advice, has it changed over time as you become more active? Is it different from another pediatric surgeon? Like, the way you would take your patients and talk to their parents about things?
Yeah, so I think, so one of the things that happens when you exercise, and especially when you're running long distance, we're running 2-3 hours, is it completely chills you and relaxes your mind. It's almost a meditation. And therefore, when you go into work, you are actually a lot more relaxed. You feel that you're a lot more pleasant. You can be a lot more pleasant. You smile at your patients. And I think that does a world of good to your patients. You're not stressed. You've had a good night's sleep because you've done a lot of physical activity. You're looking fresh. You're smiling at them. You're able to crack jokes. And the other thing that happens is, as I'm running, I tend to think a lot. And if even if it's a difficult operation that I need to do, say in 2 days' time, I actually conceptualize the whole thing in my head as I run. And I make a lot of plans and I seek a lot of solutions in my head as I run. Therefore, I think my head is a lot clearer and my plans and ideas are a lot clearer at the end of one of these long workouts. And therefore, when you go into work and when you're actually talking to people or talking to your patients, you are a lot more relaxed, you smile more, you're a lot more calm in your endeavor. And I think that sort of spills over into the way patients and especially kids look at you. So yeah, I think running is almost like a meditation. And when you wake up, when you get out of that, I think it really calms you. And I run all alone. So there's absolutely no distractions or disturbances for those 2 hours when you're running. And I think that does a world of good to you psychologically. And that definitely has this effect on your patients too. So the downside of that is, and I've seen that is, if I haven't run for 2 weeks, for example, I am a lot grumpier than I otherwise would be. I feel a lot older than I otherwise would feel. And that too, I'm sure, rubs off on people around me. So it really has this almost hypnotic effect on you when you run. So yeah, sorry, you were saying?
So I was just sort of going to suggest whether you actually sort of actively sort of suggest to any trainees that you have that they should be engaging in physical activity, and whether they think you're kind of just preaching that as a message, or whether they really believe it's going to have a benefit to them.
What I've seen is that, so long distance running is hard. I mean, it's not easy. It takes a lot of effort. And I think it's quite, you can inspire somebody to start doing something, but then at the end of the day, whether that person will continue to do it over a period of time is entirely dependent on that person. That's what I've seen. And I think as far as running again is concerned, you have two very disparate groups of people. You have one group that just can't figure what the hell you are up to. Why you are getting up at 4:45 in the morning and then you are starting to run. I mean, that group just doesn't get it. But there's the other group that feels inspired, will come out and try it, and many of them continue to the extent possible. So in that way, yes, I mean, I think when somebody sees you or a group of colleagues actually getting out and talking about it in the coffee room, saying I did a 20K yesterday, I don't think we really need to go out and be evangelical about it to them, because the very fact that we are chatting actually inspires them. And many of them come over and say, look, can I come and run with you next Sunday? And they just come out and do it. And then the next thing you hear is you're still doing halves and some of them have done a full. So I think it just naturally happens with the guys who are out there waiting for that message to get to them. The message gets to them and they start doing it.
Brilliant. And would you do that to your patients as well? Like, physical activity, would that become some part of the treatment as well? Hey, listen, be more active.
So since I deal with kids, I don't actually deal with an adult's medical problems as such. I mean, I don't talk to them about medical problems. So the answer is, I don't do it as much as I would have if I say I was an adult cardiologist or an adult pulmonary medicine person. But there are many parents who come to me over a period of time, and then they say, hey, I saw your Facebook page about you running, and then they ask me about this run. And there are many of them who have started to do it as a result of that. So although I'm not in the specialty that sort of even allows me to actually talk to a father or the mother because they are anxious enough about their kids. But over a period of time, many of them in conversations get to know that a bunch of us are doing this, and they start doing it as well. I think one of the things I want to say is that I think many of the people you interviewed, the people I've seen, many of them seem to be very natural athletes. And I was telling this to Rajat that one of the things I want to put out here is how somebody like me, who's not a natural athlete at all. Again, Indian viewers will be familiar with the term Tambrams, the sect of people in South India who are just not active, forget being athletic. So, and I belong there. And so there are a bunch of guys like me who are running, who are not naturally athletic. And it takes a lot more effort to get there and to stay fit enough to run. And I think that group of people need some more expert advice. And I sort of realized that the hard way. For almost 10 years, I would do 4, 5, 6 halves a year. And struggled with injuries, had a stress fracture. I would get up in the morning feeling sore. And a few years ago, I chanced to talk to somebody who was a sports physio, and he worked with the Indian cricket team, and they were running a sports physio clinic close to the hospital. And I actually went there. And I spent 4 months with these guys, and they had somebody who was doing deep tissue release. And I suddenly realized that, oh my God, I have to do all these things. And these guys taught me the importance of strengthening your core. They taught me the importance of, focusing on muscle groups. I'd never ever strengthened my glutes in my life. I'd never strengthened hamstrings. I used to get really bad headaches and neck pain because my interscapular muscles were really, really weak. And once I strengthened all of that in a scientific manner and my diet got better, I had no clue what carb loading was, for example. And these guys told me how to do all that. So the last 4 or 5 years, I really now know what the term running strong means. I run straight, my cores are fine, I don't tire after a while, I eat properly, I carb load. And I think I'm a lot more fit today than I was when I was 35. And that's not just because I run, that's because also I have learned to train myself properly on how to run and stay running. And I think that's the message we need to get out, because the problem in India at the moment is there's only one Rajat sitting in Delhi. There aren't enough, and I'm saying this with all seriousness, there aren't enough people like you to provide the information that guys like me need. And I just hope that in the years to come, we're going to have more of such institutes all over the country, because that's really going to benefit. There are enough people looking after Olympic athletes. But the ordinary guy like me who wants to run and stay fit, there just isn't enough expert advice available, face-to-face. You can do it online maybe, but that's my dream, that comes up, and then a lot more people are running and staying fit enough to run without injuries.
Radha, this is actually an interesting point that you raised, and takes us to a question that I was originally not planning to ask. But isn't there a problem then with, here we're talking about a guy who's been at a hospital for the last 20 years, okay, and has been active for last, forever, right? As much as not a natural athlete as you're calling yourself, which I don't necessarily agree with. But the point is, yet you got hurt, and now you're saying you've learned more newer things. Now, from my perspective, shouldn't we doctors have been taught this about a muscle in our MBBS, which we weren't?
So I was telling this sports physio person that I used to go to, and I don't know, maybe you might know him. His name is Sudarshan. He used to work with the Indian cricket team. Right. So I used to tell him. So he used to teach me physiology that I'd never heard about. And I used to tell him that the physiology I learned in medical college is just completely useless. this is the kind of physiology that you need to be taught as medical students, so that this is all practical physiology, right? So you're absolutely right. We get taught the wrong stuff, and we imbibe the wrong kind of stuff, and therefore the stuff that's really important, practically speaking, we have no clue about. And another group of people actually have to teach that to us. So yeah, that's the fact of the matter. Yeah, and so now I actually do this with my hospital colleagues. I actually sit them down, the guys who start to run, and I tell them all about your VQ max, and I tell them about carb loading and that kind of stuff. And some of them are metabolic specialists, and they said, "How do you know all this?" I said, "You don't know all this, and neither did I, but you better learn all this." So the importance of stretching, for example. The importance of stretching, I don't think anybody can overemphasize. And yet, for years and years and years, I never did it. Until I started to do it, and now I don't think I can ever do without it. So I think it's these small things that you don't learn when you start off. And as you go along, hopefully most people will learn, which keeps you injury-free. And it's only then that you enjoy it, because if you get up in the morning and you start running with, painful hip and your head is hurting, and then you're just doing it because you have to do it. It's not because you're doing it because you enjoy it. And then that defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think most people as well, they only start to sort of look into what the physiology might be or the anatomy when they start facing challenges and problems.
Absolutely, yeah.
And hopefully through this podcast and through the work that Rajat's doing, it's sending out a message that, these are absolute fundamentals and basics that everyone should be doing right from the start. And that's going to keep you injury-free. It's going to keep you active long-term throughout your life.
Absolutely. Deep tissue release, for example. I didn't even know that a term like that existed till about 4 years ago. There was this girl who came down from Canada called Nav, and she now works for RCB. And she was at the Sports Institute as well. And she would literally make me cry every time I went there. And she said, she would tell me that you're not a human being, you're a piece of wood because you're that stiff. And the importance of deep tissue release, for example. I don't think any athlete at any level who's consistency sort of exercising or running or playing tennis or whatever can afford to do so with stiff muscles. And unless you have the knowledge or you have the resources for somebody to release something that's really stiff and tender, your performance suffers. And so these are the things I think we need to improve as a sporting community in India. And I hope that happens soon.
And medical community as well, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and not just India, but worldwide.
Oh, okay. I'm glad to hear that.
Darren, just say a bit more about the muscles. I mean, what misconceptions maybe, or, the very basic stuff about muscles.
Yeah, I think sort of Krish has touched on this slightly, but even just the very basic anatomy of the muscle, people don't really appreciate, where is the origin of the muscle? So where is it attaching to? Where is it inserting to? People aren't quite aware. So for example, if we look at the quadriceps muscles, so the muscles that give the function so that we can flex our knee, people aren't aware that they actually attach above the hip. So they're going to have an effect when it comes to hip mobility, hip pain. They actually attach below the knee, so they can have an effect right at the knee and beyond. In terms of the very basic structure, having a fascia, and obviously that's where we start talking about things like myofascial release, deep tissue release. That's really going back to understanding what are the fundamental structures, the anatomy of muscle tissue and the surrounding tissues, and then applying that to the function and making sure that that's integrated and doing things to kind of improve the function of the muscle. So whether that be through strengthening exercise, flexibility and mobility, doing soft tissue release, deep tissue release, massage, all of those things together will ultimately improve function and help in running or any other physical activity.
Thanks for that, Darren. Thank you.
Yeah, if I interject and just reinforce the fact that, again, I had simply had no idea the role fascia plays in your stiffness. You assume it's only muscle. but the importance that fascia plays and the need to keep that released as well, I don't think can be overemphasized. And these are things that we are, even as doctors, we are completely ignorant about, till such time that somebody actually demonstrates it to you. And then you realize, oh man, yeah, this is so important.
That's so interesting, yeah. Right? Rather, I mean, we go to the dissection hall and, we think we're Supermans and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I think what we forget is the cadaver doesn't move. It needs to move.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I think that's a fantastic point as well, and goes back to my point about connecting the anatomy to function. So ultimately, when you're assessing a patient or you're looking at particular issues someone might have, it's important to understand the anatomy and how that impacts what their functional deficit actually is. And you're right, it's very difficult to actually look at the function of a cadaver.
Brilliant. In summary, Radha, anything for the society out there, like, who are trying to pick up either sports or why not even advice for physical activity, whether now in this lockdown or otherwise?
So I think the general advice, and I've learned it the hard way, is number one, you need to exercise. And there's a scientific basis behind exercising, apart from keeping your heart healthy and your body healthy. I think people also need to know that exercise releases something called endorphins, which are feel-good hormones. And it can really, really, really lighten your mood and make you feel much better as a person. And your confidence increases, your happiness levels increase, and I can't overemphasize the importance of regular exercise. The other thing to say is, with regards to running, most people run to stay fit, but most of us don't realize how fit you need to be to keep running. And so you need to go to the gym, you need to strengthen, you need to stretch, you need to do all that in order to keep running and enjoy the running. Lockdown, difficult period, especially for the elderly. The advice is don't go out too much. Try and do as much as you can within homes, and not just keep yourself mentally occupied, but also keep yourself, do something physical. And that itself will, help you feel happier and, handle these difficult situations.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the episode today. I think it's fantastic to see how sort of exercise and running has had such a positive effect on your professional career and your life in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you very much. Well, we'll end the episode here. And thanks very much for joining us. Thanks a lot, Rajat.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Krish.